Hi, my name is David Kelsey, and today we're going to work on some practice exercises for lectures 9 and 10 of my critical thinking course. And what we're going to be practicing today is translating categorical claims into standard form. So if you remember the standard form categorical claims, there are 4 types. There's the A claim, the E, the I, and the O, right? And so what we want to do is take these categorical claims that we're going to get as examples here and try to make them, turn them into a standard form one, okay? So let's look, for example, at the claim, not all senators are politicians, okay? So a claim like this, you see straight away that senators and politicians appear to be the terms, right? And again, if you think about a claim that says something like not all, it looks kind of like an O claim. So this is actually going to translate as some senators are not politicians, okay? Our next example is you can be a senator only if you're a politician, right? If you remember back to lecture 10, we talked about how claims that have only in them are A claims, right? And then what follows only is the predicate of the A claim. So here this one's going to translate as the A claim, all senators are politicians, right? Okay, so then the next example we have here is being a politician is not enough to make you a senator. And so you have a not enough here, which is kind of a strange one, but it's actually going to translate, because of that negative in there, it's going to translate as an O claim, right? And so it's going to translate as some politicians are not senators, okay? The last example for this slide here, we have, there are no philosophers who are not scholars, okay? And so again, you have that kind of double negative going on, no philosophers, not scholars, right? So it's going to translate into an A claim, which is all philosophers are scholars, all right? The next example, again, we're still working on translation. The next example we have is nobody who is a politician is also a senator. So this one should sound pretty clearly like an E claim to you, right? No politicians are senators, okay? The next one is nobody arrived except the cheerleaders. So this is a nobody, and then it has also an except in it, which is kind of a bit of a tougher one. So if you think about what the claim is really saying, it's saying that everyone who arrived is a cheerleader, so the claim is all people who arrived are cheerleaders. The next claim, it says, except for vice presidents, nobody got raises, right? So essentially what this claim is saying is that everybody who got a raise is a vice president, so the claim translates as all people who got raises are vice presidents, okay? The next example we have, unless people arrived early, they couldn't get seats, okay? So this one seems to be saying that everyone who got a seat arrived early. So this will translate as all people who got seats are people who arrived early. Okay, so our next example, most home movies are as boring as dirt. Okay, most usually will translate as an I claim, maybe an O, but we can translate this one as some home movies are things that are as boring as dirt. Okay. Notice there that as boring as dirt, to make that into a proper term, I have to add things to it, right? So it becomes things that are as boring as dirt. And so that just makes it into a noun phrase, okay? The next example, the only tests George fails are the ones he takes. So again, if you remember back to lecture 10, we talked about how claims with the only in them are A claims. And what follows the only is the subject of the A. So here we have then an A claim where we have all tests George fails are tests he takes. All right. The next example, you can't be a member unless you're over 50. Again, we have a kind of double negative occurring in this one, so it's going to translate as an A claim. All members are people over 50. All right. Next example, nobody catches on without studying. Again, it looks like kind of a double negative going on. And so we're going to translate as all people who catch on are people who study. Okay? Okay, so last few examples here, we have a kind of negative claim, roofers aren't millionaires. That seems pretty straightforwardly an E claim, right? No roofers are millionaires. That one translates. All right, the next claim, unless you pass this test, you won't pass the course, right? So this one is a bit of a tough one. It's going to actually translate as all people who pass the course are people who pass this test, right? Because that's what essentially it's saying, right? That you can't pass the course unless you pass the test. Okay? So the next one, it says, nobody plays who isn't in full uniform. This one's going to, again, it's kind of got that double negative thing going on, so it's going to translate as an A claim, right? All people who play are people who are in full uniform, all right? And then lastly, some of the surfers who aren't in the water are skillful swimmers, okay? And this is a bit of a tricky one. It's going to translate actually, you see that it kind of looks like an O claim as it stands, right? Some surfers who aren't in the water are skillful swimmers, so it looks kind of like an O, so we're going to translate it as an O, and so we'll translate as some skillful swimmers are not surfers in the water. Okay, so that'll do it for these examples here of translation, and so hopefully this gives you a kind of taste of how it works, and so we can try them on our own now. So all right, great job, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.